compassionate leave she'd been offered. "Not a bloody peep," the desk sergeant said grimly. "You ask me, they can't make up their minds whether it was Myers or a copycat sniper killer." Hillary sighed heavily. During her last murder case, a nutter with a rifle had been busy in the country, shooting and killing policemen and women with a single rifle bullet. Just before Mel was shot, a police officer in a nearby town had become the latest victim, but the sniper killer had been caught shortly afterwards. Ironically, everyone at Thames Valley HQ had heaved a sigh of relief, only to see one of their own gunned down barely 48 hours later. Many thought that a man named Clive Myers was the culprit, an ex-army man. He'd seen the rapists of his daughter walk free from court due to a clerical error on the part of the police. His wife had subsequently committed suicide, and his daughter remained in a mental institution to this day. Mel, as nominal head of the investigation, had taken most of the flak. But as far as she knew, Clive Myers had been leading a blameless life ever since, and although his premises had been searched thoroughly, and his movements on the day of the shooting meticulously investigated, no charges had been forthcoming, and it didn't look likely that they would be any time soon. "Well, can't stand chatting all day," Hillary said. "I'd better go and see how my DS is getting on. Any gossip about how she's been doing since being left in charge?" She cocked an eye at him, but the older man grinned and shook his head. "Nobody dare say anything against DS Fordham, Mom," he said dryly, too scared they'd be wearing their ghoulies for earrings. Hillary was still smiling grimly over that one as she climbed the stairs and entered the huge open-plan office on the second floor, where she and her team had their cluster of tables. She was aware of a slight stir rippling throughout the room as her presence was noted. Just inside the door, a big man rose and smiled at her. DS Sam Waterstone held out a hand, and she quickly took it. "Hillary, glad to see you back." "Thanks, Sam." She didn't linger, and he didn't keep her, but it had broken the ice, as he'd intended, and several of her colleagues called out greetings and sympathetic murmurs as she passed. The whole station house knew she and Mel went back forever, and that her loss, perhaps more than any others, save for Janine Mallows, of course, was almost certainly the greatest of them all. For Mel had been both a pal and her boss, a combination guaranteed to cover her back should she ever have needed it. And now that she had returned, she was feeling the cold draft of his absence more than ever. When she was halfway across the room, she saw that her team was already on the move. At first, she thought they were coming to greet her en masse, which made her feel distinctly wrong-footed. But as they got closer, she realized that she'd mistaken the mood. The tall woman in the lead was wearing her trademark trouser suit, and her bony, striking face was set in stone. Her short blonde hair was as spiky and in-your-face as ever, and, as she acknowledged her DI's presence, her eyes flickered with something that looked remarkably like chagrin. "Gov," Gemma Fordham said with a curt nod. Behind her, DS Keith Barrington grinned with genuine happiness, his red hair brighter than she seemed to remember it. Last, as always, was DS Frank Ross, who nodded at her wordlessly and looked at her curiously. He was wearing a nearly clean white shirt and loose grey trousers. As ever, he smelled faintly of beer and cigarette smoke. "Can't stop, Gov," Gemma Fordham said, barely breaking stride, and Hillary's eyebrow rose. Keith shrugged meaningfully, and Frank Ross grinned wolfishly. Ever the troublemaker, he was no doubt hoping for fireworks, but Hillary merely nodded and moved a little to one side to let them pass. Well, she'd hardly expected the welcome wagon and a brass band. For cops, work always came first. Before she could carry on to her own desk, however, she saw the door to DCI Paul Danvers's cubicle open, and he beckoned her in. "Hillary." Paul Danvers, at 38, was a good 7 years her junior, and always looked as if he'd just stepped out of a photograph for a mail order catalogue. With his thick, perfectly barbered blonde hair and expensive suits, he reminded her of an insurance salesman. "Sir, I just thought I'd pop in to get a head start on the paperwork," she said blandly, not wanting to have to stay and chat. The fact that Danvers had always fancied her and hadn't yet seen